want to say a few words on the 70th anniversary of NATO. Big summit happening in London right now. So all the major NATO leaders, of course, are there. Trump, Trudeau, Johnson, Merkel, Macron, Erdogan. Um, there's a number of things to say around this. I'm going to keep it quite brief because it's an ongoing situation, and with a lot of personalities in the room, anything can develop as part of this. But I'll just say this. Looking at RT's coverage just reminds me of why we need NATO. Um, there are a lot of challenges are, that the organisation confronts, but there are also internal issues that will continue to fester if they're not addressed. Let me just say, for the record, I firmly believe in NATO. I believe in the principles of NATO. I understand the controversies around it, particularly for those who come from a pretty lefty perspective. They see it as, symbolic of the Anglo-Saxon project and so on. But I would say this: is there a credible alternative to NATO? I'm not convinced that there is. I mean, right now, we see the bickering between Macron and Trump. And I'm not a fan of Trump, but Macron isn't squeaky clean either. Macron has said the organisation is brain dead. I'm not sure that's the most diplomatic language. Trump responded by saying that it was a nasty thing to say, and he believes in NATO. This is coming from the same president that has rubbished the organisation in the past. But it was incredible. They were sitting there at the press conference, basically not holding anything back. Trump. That's why he's a great politician. That was a classic non-answer, and I didn't catch what Macron responded to in kind. There's no mystery that Trump and Macron have never seen eye to eye. There was a brief sort of bromance period, but that was very brief. I think one of the biggest challenges with NATO actually is the incumbent in the White House. These impeachment proceedings are going on in the backdrop of all of this. Trump is the most volatile president of modern times, and I'm including Nixon with that. Um, I think this is a president who, on one hand, takes robust action against China and Russia, and he has. His administration has made considerable efforts in that regard. Yet at the same time, his ego is a liability because he will actually denigrate his own security services in front of the Russian tyrant. He will invite the Chinese to investigate a domestic political rival. I mean, only the most blowhard, hardline Trump supporters cannot see that there's a problem with the way this president communicates things. And it's not telling it like it is, it's being bloody reckless. This is a president who insults NATO allies. This is a president who asks to buy part of a sovereign nation and then has a tantrum when they understandably refuse. I'm referring, of course, to the Greenland situation. So I think so long as Trump is in the White House, there is a major trust issue. But, and this is a very, very big caveat, for as much as I personally don't like Trump and I think that he is a liability, that still is a lesser issue than the threats we face from, for example, pan-Islamist terror and the rise and cooperation of Russia and China. China's behaviour over the last few years have shown it absolutely cannot be trusted. With Russia, that was obvious. I mean, it's been obvious with Putin for years. But really, in the last sort of year and a half, with the Hong Kong situation, with the situation in Xinjiang, but particularly, even if you leave aside the human rights factor, if you look at how China has blatantly tried to undermine Western democracies, the understanding in the West was, okay, with China's economic rise, there would be political reform. That simply hasn't happened. So China cannot be trusted. So long as it's under the Communist Party, particularly this president, Xi Jinping, it cannot be trusted. And there is understandable concern about cooperation between Moscow and Beijing. And I think that we just need to be very assertive. I think that we really need to call out those people in our midst who serve as useful idiots. I feel very strongly about that. I don't even want to waste time engaging with them because I don't think you can reason with such people. You know, those people who go down the RT rabbit hole, they believe all its conspiracy theories and they're anti West, but they go beyond that. They go to the point of actively being apologists for the regimes in Moscow and Beijing, and that frankly sickens me. You know, I can accept left wing opinions on NATO with reason, but if you are going to the point where, and you know, I don't want to derail too much, but you get so called freelance journalists that go down this rabbit hole, experienced journalists, people like John Pilger, who, as far as I'm concerned, has made himself nothing but a lapdog for the Kremlin in recent years. And I think some people get so into a situation of wanting to vindicate themselves, even experienced journalists like John Pilger, it's depressing. But basically, I know how this goes. A video like this, for example, is always going to get thumbs down from the Russia apologists, from the RT zealots, from those who, you know, clamber to RT because it confirms their conspiracy theories, except that it doesn't. A lot of it is just false and misleading and distorted. I think the West must be assertive, but that doesn't mean that there aren't real problems within the organisation. I mean, the Turkey situation is a major example of this. Jens Stoltenberg has said that Turkey is essential in the fight against ISIS, but the Turkish president is an Islamist. I think Erdogan can be about as trusted as Putin is. Um, and I think he is a real thorn in the side of NATO. Turkey is a very important country. It can't simply be dismissed, but I think it is very plausible. You know, if we're going to, speaking from a British perspective, if we're going to have a situation where we have tensions with our closest European neighbours over Brexit, which in my view has been a massive distraction to everything else, you know, then what if we can argue with the French and Germans over Brexit, then why shouldn't we speak out against the Turks over A, their human rights record, and B, Erdogan's Islamist leanings? I mean, Erdogan, in my opinion, is a thug and a tyrant. This man um, has presided over an appalling crackdown on liberty, on journalistic freedom. You know, it's really quite depressing to see what's happening in Turkey. And yet, we can't change the fact that Erdogan is the Turkish president. Um, I can't see a situation where Turkey, I mean, Turkey has bought weapons from Russia. The problem is, Erdogan is sort of blackmailing NATO, I think, because NATO does rely on Turkey, but Erdogan's basically doing his own thing. And he's kind of angrily rebuking NATO if they tell him off. I'm going to round this up. I can hear my phone ringing, but I believe in NATO. I would say this: the internal problems that the organisation has um, need to be addressed, but I do not see any credible alternative to NATO as a principle of free nations working together. Well, mostly free nations. I'm not going to call Turkey a free nation. Um, I think it's got some very strong principles. So, what this summit achieves, who knows? Clearly, the world is a very different place to 1949. You know, China's far more powerful than it was then. It's it's a very different world. But we have to send out the message to Xi and Putin that their anti-West, anti-democracy agenda. I mean, I personally believe that Putin and Xi pose a grave threat in this world to liberal democratic societies, and those useful idiots in our midst, on both the far right and the far left, who advocate particularly for the Putinist regime, it's I think they really need to be confronted and chastised peacefully. I think that we could do a lot more. I think Ofcom absolutely needs to strip the license of RT and CGTN because these are like viruses in our society, spreading misinformation, spreading the lies of Beijing and Moscow. And there's so much more we can do. Thanks for watching.